Hey everyone, my name's Cara, my pronouns are they, them, and it's June. In several places around the world, though not everywhere, June is Pride Month. And when I say that, I am referring to 2S LGBTQ plus Pride Month, or LGBTQ Pride Month, or however else other kind of ways you want to say it. It's Rainbow Month. And I am a member of said community. I wanted to do a video related to Pride Month this year, while at the same time that feels weird to me because June is not the only time for us to acknowledge and celebrate being non-heterosexual. Of course, that is something that is true all the time. So acknowledging the strangeness of that. I used to make more content specifically about this, and I don't, because it's not the main thing that I talk about. But there is a topic that I wanted to bring up that I notice people talking about, not just in June, but in general, which is how we refer to people in relationships. As we get older, a lot of people, regardless of sexuality, talk about the fact that saying things like boyfriend and girlfriend are not only binary and don't apply to everybody, but also just don't feel right as we age. And this makes me think of personal experience because I've been a content creator for so long. I talk about relationships now in a much more vague way. And so years and years ago, I started referring to any time that I would mention in a vlog anything about the person that I was dating or the person that I had been with for a long time. I just referred to them as my partner. And it seemed at some point in the past that did make some people assume that I was referring to another woman, because some people hear partner and they think of it only as shorthand for gay people not wanting to reveal that they're with someone of the same sex. For context, for those of you who don't already know me, I am bi/pansexual. People use these terms in all different ways, so it depends on the way that people use the term. But when I was a teenager and first started identifying as bisexual, that was the only term that I had come across at that time. That was the only term that I knew, other than being heterosexual, which we called and many people still call being straight, or being gay or a lesbian, but I knew that that wasn't me either way. Bisexuality is what described me, because I was like, yeah, I'm not just attracted to one thing or another. I'm attracted to everyone, is how I saw that term. Now, of course, bi means two. And when I was a kid, I didn't know any trans people. I didn't know any non-binary people. I didn't identify as non-binary at the time. So to me, that term really did refer to everyone. And of course, then later, I learned about the term pansexual. And that prefix, pan, means all. And I didn't really feel that when I first learned that word, because I was like, well, just because I like everyone sort of regardless of gender doesn't mean I like all people, is how I saw it. Because I was like, I don't know all people. I'm not attracted to all people. So I recognize this is like not what these terms mean, but this is how it was in my mind. So for years, I identified as bisexual, which to me meant everybody, regardless of gender, could be a potential partner of mine, but that I wasn't claiming to be attracted to all people, because that felt like too much for me. So now I identify as bi/pan, because I think it depends on how people use these terms, what best applies to me. And I know a lot of people who see bisexuality as referring not to boys and girls and the binary gender, but to having attraction to genders like mine and genders unlike mine. And that is the two, is like people whose gender and all expression is like mine, and people whose expression is different from me. Like, that is putting it into two groups, even though that other group is like a huge spectrum of different identities and expressions. So I identify with both terms, and really to me, the exact terminology that I use isn't important at all unless I'm speaking with someone who might be a potential relationship of mine, right? Like, if there's actually attraction between me and another person, then we need to know kind of if that's a possibility for us. But in those cases, I'm not like, oh, no, sorry, my attraction to you must not be real because I identify this way, and how you're saying you are falls outside of that. Like, no, I'm just gonna like a person or not like a person. But anyway, so I identify as queer. I do use that term. I didn't in high school, because in high school, a lot of things are still being used as insults, including the word gay. So, like, we can't really judge anything that I use now by how people have used it as an insult, because even the word witch has been used as an insult for centuries. And of course, I identify as a witch. So, but a lot of older people in my life don't get why some of us identify as queer now, because they only know the word queer to be a bad thing to call someone. But I use it. For me, it is a general term that I do feel that I identify with. So all those disclaimers aside, when you are a queer or queer adjacent person, when you're a member of this community, and especially as we get older, and especially as we know more people who don't just identify their gender in some very binary way, there becomes the question of, like, what do you call your partner? And so I have said this word already multiple times just because I'm talking and this is how I naturally talk. I use the term partner. You've probably picked up on that already. I've been using that term for a very, very long time, and I like it for several reasons. One, I like that it is gender neutral, and so it does not reveal anything about the genders or presentations or expressions of my partners over time. But I also like it because, to me, words like boyfriend and girlfriend, which also don't really have a gender neutral option, also just sound a lot younger to me, but not just younger, because it's not just about age. To me, it is about the depth of that relationship. So, like, someone that I'm just getting to know and we might be kind of casually dating, I might refer to them as boyfriend, girlfriend, or, you know, whatever term actually fits with that, which, if they don't identify with either one of those terms for gender expression reasons, then it becomes a whole different thing. But to me, those terms signify something that is maybe newer, maybe just kind of casual. And to me, calling someone my partner is like saying that it's kind of moved beyond boyfriend, girlfriend, person I'm casually dating. And honestly, I think, and I mean, this hasn't been the case for a while, because I just don't, like, refer to people in these ways in my life generally anymore. But I think that what I would say is just like, I'm dating this person. I wouldn't say my boyfriend, my girlfriend. I would be like, this person I'm dating, or the person I'm seeing right now. I think in the past I have sort of tried to see how significant other might work, but to me I'm like, yeah, that doesn't feel right for something that's like casual and I'm not really sure where it's going yet type of thing. So, but anyway, when I'm in a committed relationship with someone, to me, that's my partner. They're no longer just somebody I'm dating, and this term can sort of help describe who they are to me in my life, that we are more partners in that we're doing aspects of life together as a team. So years and years ago on my channel, I would always be referring to my partner this and my partner that, because it's a committed relationship, and also I like that it's gender neutral. And a lot of the people that I date are also queer, so they might also like that for their specific purposes anyway. But, like, I'm using the term partner in that sense of, like, you don't need to know who this person is. I'm just referring to this person who has this role in my life, right? But then there was this time that I was seeing this other woman. It's so weird for me to, like, refer to people around my age as women. Like, that is the age, like, we are adults, but I don't identify with that word. And, like, it is difficult because there's not a lot of, like, intermediate sort of age and maturity feeling level words. I come from the Midwest, where guy is a gender neutral term, so we might say, like, you guys, and we mean everybody, but a lot of people hear guy and they think a male person. Same with dude. Like, oh, I was talking to this dude, most people picture a male presenting person, even though we might use the term dude to refer to everybody. So anyways, there's not a lot of good words like that between girl and woman for people who do identify with the feminine aspects. I identify with womanhood because that has been my lived experience, but, like, I don't go around calling myself a woman. I consider myself a non-binary femme, but that's really a whole other topic. Point being, just because there's not a lot of other good words for this, I was dating this other AFAB person at the time, and their gender identity has shifted over the years since I was dating them anyway. But at the time that I was dating them, it felt appropriate to refer to them as my girlfriend. And so there was one time that I said something about my girlfriend casually in a video, And I remember getting a comment from somebody that was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you finally felt comfortable enough to say girlfriend instead of having to hide behind the label of partner. I'm so glad that you feel like comfortable to say I have a girlfriend. And I was just like, that's not why I've been saying partner, but it revealed to me that perhaps the whole time people were assuming that I meant a certain gender, because if you only know the word partner to be code for same-sex partner, then hearing a bisexual, pansexual person who is feminine presenting say partner, some people assumed I always meant another feminine presenting person. And then when I said girlfriend, they assumed I was talking about the same person. There's also an assumption here of monogamy. There's an assumption that I would only ever be talking about one person that I'm dating or in a relationship with. So there's a lot of assumptions happening here. But in that example, when I had been talking about my partner for like a year or something like that, however long it was, I had been talking about one person. And then when I started talking about someone I started dating and I called them my girlfriend, that was a different person. But a lot of people didn't know that because I have not made it a practice for many years now, since it kind of became way too much of a big thing for me to talk about when I start one relationship and another relationship, because years ago there was more like mention of my relationships, and then when they ended it was really devastating because in addition to having to deal with it on a personal level, I also had to talk about it in my content. So I just don't do that anymore. So I'm aware that when I talk about these different people over time and I say the word partner, people also, may or may not know if I'm talking about the same person or different people over time, and that's fine. You don't need to know all of those details, and that's another thing that I like about that word. But it just made me think about the one time that I was talking about somebody else who I referred to with a different term. People made all kinds of assumptions about my use of that term. So I've heard people talk about it more recently. I've been listening to some other podcasts and things like that where people are talking about relationships and gender identity and like, what do you call your partners and what do your partners call you? And so I use they, them pronouns now. I didn't always. And I have had some partners in the past who do refer to me and still do to their family refer to me as their girlfriend sometimes, and I'm fine with that because I know that when talking to people who may not be accepting of our genders and sexualities, that we sometimes have to say the thing that is the safest to say. It's not what I prefer to be called. I do prefer to be called my partner's partner. And I know that they agree in the sense that even if my partner doesn't use they, them pronouns, for example, in their day-to-day life, I always refer to them with they, them pronouns when I'm talking to people because of this idea that we want to keep it gender neutral as a way of kind of keeping specifics private. And so they know that when I talk about them to other people or in my content, I'm referring to them with they, them pronouns. And that is so natural to me. I refer to everyone with they, them pronouns unless I know specifically what pronouns they want to use and I am trying to identify them. If I am making things more anonymous, I always use they, them pronouns. And they know that and they're okay with that. And similarly, I know that my partner, when they are talking to other people in their life, will refer to me as their partner out of a desire to not make it specific about the type of person that they're dating right now. I happen to be a queer person, and I've had mostly queer partners for the last however many years. But I also think that it's fine for people who are not queer to use the term partner, because to me that's making it more broadly accepted and helping it to move further away from this assumption that anytime someone says partner, they really mean same-sex partner, but they don't want to say it. Like, that's not necessarily what people mean at all anymore. But I came across a post years ago, and I, intended to do a video or something about it then because it made me so curious, but then I never ended up talking about it, so it has stayed in my mind all this time. But I came across a post years ago. Somebody was doing a thing for Pride Month, and they talked about something like more people using they, them pronouns to help make it more widely recognizable and more accepted or something like that. And somebody replied to them and said, yeah, I totally agree. It's kind of like the same reason why me and my straight boyfriend, like they're in a heterosexual relationship, straight woman talking about her and her boyfriend. She said kind of the same reason why we will refer to each other as partner to help that become more recognized. And I was like, yeah, totally. Like, I get that. But the person that they were responding to, the OP in this situation, the person who posted the thing, responded to them and said, ooh, actually, I'm not okay with that. As a straight person myself, I would never want to do that because I feel like that's crossing the line into appropriating gay culture. And I was like, and whether they said gay culture or queer culture, I can't remember right now. But their perspective was hetero people should not be using the term partner because that's queer culture. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on those types of, I'm not an anthropologist of any kind. I'm not an expert on any particular culture. Just because I am part of one demographic community does not mean that I can speak for everyone in it. But from my perspective, that didn't make any sense because to me, if the only people using that term are queer, especially if the only people using that term are homosexual people, then it perpetuates the idea that anybody saying it is using it as code for same sex when that might not be the case. So I'm in favor of everybody using partner and gender neutral language wherever possible because I think that it is good for everybody to remember that things are not as binary as they have seemed for a very long time, and as many of our languages other than English are very binary in their language, and that's not referring just to people, but it does affect the way that queer people are able to speak about themselves in those languages. But to me, it's good for everybody to remember and to use terms that let people, or rather encourage people, to maybe think again and notice where you are making an assumption. Like if somebody's been saying partner forever, but you assume that they're with a man, and so you imagine that every time they say partner, and then you meet their partner and it's a woman, then you're like, oh, now I'm realizing that I was making an assumption about who your partner is, even though you never said it was a man. That's what I was assuming. You know what I mean? And so it's different when you have a person in your life who wants to be referred to by a certain thing. If there is someone who wants to be referred to with she, her pronouns specifically, or he, him pronouns specifically, or ze-zer, or any of those other neo-pronouns that people may use, or people who don't want to use pronouns and just want to have you call them by their name, and I don't mean that to be a reference, I mean literally just say their name. It is important to do that. In my life, because I'm a content creator, the people in my life know that I will be referring to them in neutral ways for anonymity and for privacy. In my day-to-day life, I am using the pronouns that they use, that they want to be called. So it's a little different in that regard. But it's also in this term of partner versus something else. So I just wanted to note that for me, terms like boyfriend, girlfriend, like are perfectly fine terms if the person that I'm seeing relates to either of those terms. But I am an adult. I do see adults. We are not boys and girls. I like terms like girly as like a non-gender related at all type of term. Like when you talk about being a tea girly instead of a coffee girly, something like that, like that's fine with me. I like using those terms regardless of gender. There's a lot of terms like that I will use regardless of gender, but I always have to make sure that I'm saying them to people who either already know that or I'm giving that disclaimer that like I'm not calling someone a girl. There are also, of course, things that I am okay with my friends and I saying to and amongst each other that I am not okay with strangers on the internet using to refer to us. So it's a very different situation when it's public and, you know, the general internet public, as I sometimes like to call it, versus people I know, people I have developed trust with, that we know what we mean when we say certain things and we don't have to give those disclaimers because we've covered that. So being on the internet is a totally different animal. So I wanted to bring this up because I wanted to ask you all, like, if you are queer or non-binary, trans, genderqueer, gender fluid, anything that might make you want to use words other than boyfriend, girlfriend, Are there other fun names that you use? I know that another one that some people like to use is lover. That is a term that would mean something very specific to me. And for me to use that term instead of saying this person I'm dating or partner would imply that I have a relationship with them that is to a certain level, but we're not on partner level. I haven't had reason to use that term separately. Someone's either my partner or they're someone I'm seeing or whatever. But that's another one that I am aware of some people using. It feels very theatrical to me as a person with a theater degree. Like, I've 100% had to call people my lover on stage. Like, it's a line that gets written, but it's not something that's in my natural speech. Who knows, maybe I'll do another vlog in like 10 years and I'm calling everyone my lover. But anyway, since I brought it up, this idea of having certain terms that I use and feel okay with in a gender neutral way, there was this thing. Here it is. It was a thing from Instagram forever ago. I'll put it up here on the screen. Pronoun check. It was from a user called Kinnertime. I'm sure many people have made other versions of this, but I shared this with one of my community groups years ago, and a bunch of us filled it out. And it's like, of these things, which ones are like, yes, I like to be referred to with this, and I'm not so sure, kind of could go either way. No, I do not want to be referred to with this, and if used as slang or without regard to gender, I am okay with this term being used about me. And so we filled this out. And what it has on it is he, him, she, her, they, them, it, its, Mr., Miss or Ma'am, mix, sir, lady, masculine compliments, feminine compliments, bro, dude, sis, king, queen, boy, guy, man, girl, woman. And so I have saved my answers to this over the last several years. I didn't do it every year. I'm not going to put them all up on the screen, but I can tell you that it was between 2022 and 2023 when I went from going by they and she to just using they, them, because I started being like, about she, her. And I still listed as just Pretty much the whole second column, from the beginning, I was like, yeah, if these are said as slang or without regard to actual gender, I like all these words. Bro, dude, sis, king, queen, boy, guy, man. And then girl and woman, I put because those are related to my perceived gender identity. So I have more of an opinion about those. But it's the same with like girl or just like boy, please. Like you can call me any of that in those sort of slang terms. And I know you're not talking about my gender. You can call me queen just as much as you call me king, dude, bro. I say dude a lot and I say bro a lot, like unironically. I am a fan of masculine or feminine compliments because, girl, let's be real, I'm a fan of compliments. Although, again, being online is a different thing. I do not like comments about my appearance on the internet. We all know that. I'm cute, witch. I'm cute. You don't have to say it because I already know. Compliments don't have to be just about appearance, though. Feel free to compliment some other stuff. And I think what they mean by this, masculine versus feminine compliments, is like feminine compliments traditionally are like, oh, you're so pretty, you're so beautiful. And like masculine compliments are more like, you're handsome. Even though historically those words have been applied to beings regardless of gender. I think one that feels pretty gender neutral to me is gorgeous. Like, I think gorgeous gets equally applied to people of all genders, so I try to use those if I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I think that's what they mean by that. But I went from being like, no, don't call me Mr., to recognizing that I also use Mr. and like Miss and Ma'am in a slang way. Like, I will say to anybody, what do you think you're doing over there, mister? And maybe this mostly comes out when I'm talking to non-human animals, but there are times where I've been like, you sit down and let me take care of that, miss. And I am not necessarily referring to the gender of the person. So I recognize that I also consider those slang. And then it became kind of the same with sir and lady, like, excuse me, sir. And I do get miss and ma'am a lot from people in the world because, again, I get it. I am a feminine presenting person. But I do, like, if I have to use an honorific on something, I'm using mix, MX. But I don't mind ma'am, especially in certain contexts. I'm old enough now that I get ma'am more than I get miss, which is very interesting because I've always looked quite a bit younger than I am, so I got miss for a very long time, and I think now I'm finally getting to the point where like 80% of the time it's ma'am. if anybody says it at all. So there's that pronoun check if you want to do that. I think it's cool to kind of just have it. Check in with yourself every so often. Like maybe the way that you think about some of those things has changed over time. And I really think that like thinking of things as slang or without regard to gender opens up so much of language. Like there's so many things that I say that I don't mean in a gendered way, but you never know who's hearing it and assuming that it is a gendered thing. So anyway, that's me. I use they them pronouns, and probably more than I identify as anything else, I am a witch. That's not my gender, that's who I am. The descriptor that I identify with the most is probably witch. And like human, but probably even witch more than human. That might be a totally other thing. So let's leave that there. Thank you very much for watching and or listening to this video. I will see you next time. And until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye. If you check out my website at caramiawitch.com, you can find out about all the other fun stuff I'm getting up to, or sign up for my email list and I'll send it right to your inbox.